All right. Yep, it's recording. Okay.
All right, perfect.
I'm gonna, I'll stop for now, but okay. So thank you everyone for attending today and for signing on to this Zoom meeting. We are going to ask that everyone keep themselves on mute until Tricia finishes presenting, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and you can unmute yourself at that point. All right. So I wanted to start just by reading two bios. So the first is of Tricia Dahl, who is our presenter today, and then Dr. Krishnan Sharan will be joining us at the end to help answer questions. And so I'll read both their bios to start. Tricia Dahl is a senior research assistant at Yale University School of Medicine, working directly for Dr. Krishnan Sharan. Since 2001, she has worked on a number of clinical trials in the area of adolescent and adult substance abuse. She has done extensive work with adults who are heavy drinkers in an effort to find an effective way to treat alcoholism. She has also been involved in researching the effects of e-cigarettes on adolescent behavior as part of Yale's Tobacco Center of Regulatory Science, which recently completed a 5-year grant looking at how flavors and sweeteners affect the initiation and development of addiction to current tobacco and modified risk tobacco products. Currently, the group is studying the influence of flavors, sweeteners, and other constituents of tobacco products on appeal, use, and abuse. Ms. Dahl has traveled to over 75 schools in Connecticut, where she has presented talks about adolescent vaping behaviors and potential concerns to parents, administrators, teachers, and students. So we are in very good hands. And then Dr. Krishnan Sharan's work is focused on understanding the biology and behavior underlying addictions, with the goal of developing optimal treatments for teenage and adult users. Dr. Krishnan Sharan leads the NIH and FDA-funded Tobacco Center of Regulatory Science at Yale, which is developing scientific evidence to support tobacco regulation. Her research on youth tobacco use has used focus groups and surveys to understand patterns and perceptions of use of tobacco products, clinical trials to develop and test the use of novel behavioral and pharmacological interventions, and neuroimaging tools to understand neural predictors of treatment response. Dr. Krishnan Sharan has contributed to the Surgeon General's report on preventing tobacco use among young people, and served as a member of the FDA's Tobacco Product Scientific Advisory Committee. She has been involved in many efforts to educate the public about concerns related to e-cigarette use by youth, including a TED Med Talk, congressional and other federal briefings, media and community presentations, education programs for students, parents, and teachers, as well as local and federal regulatory efforts. Her work has been featured in TV, radio, print, and internet media outlets. So I'd like to formally welcome you, Tricia and Dr. Krishnan Sharan, and thank you very much for having Greenwich Together host you for this very important talk on vaping prevention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me. And yes, Dr. Krishnan Sharan is the leader of all of this research that we do. And knowing that the group that we have here today may have some more counselor specific questions, therapeutic questions, she thought that it would be best, since she is the PhD, that she come on later on and just make sure that everybody's questions are answered to the best of our ability. So I can certainly answer any questions about our research, but if there's anything further, then she can address those questions. So right now I'm going to share my screen. Just hang on one second. Let's get this here. Let's see. Of course, this worked better when we were practicing, and now it's going to give me grief. Here we go. Let's share the screen first and then go to presenter view. There we go. So I lost all of you guys, but hopefully you can all see this fine. Can you see this good?
Yes.
Yes.
I can.
Okay,
yes.
good. All righty. So in this presentation today, I'm going to spend a little bit of time talking about current rates of e-cigarette use among youth. Then I'm going to discuss what youth are saying about why they're using and the effects it has on them. And finally, we'll go over how we can change what they believe and help them quit vaping. So let's begin with prevalence data. This is brand new, just released yesterday. Data from Monitoring the Future survey for more than 11,800 students from 112 schools across the US. Now, normally this is a much, much bigger sample, but because of COVID, this data was only collected from February through March of 2020 and had to be stopped. So we're unsure if anything changed throughout this pandemic. Also, it should be noted that this data represents only a quarter of the normal sample size. So the number of students reporting past year vaping was unchanged from 2019, roughly 1 in 3 10th and 12th graders and 1 in 6 8th graders. So continuing with the Monitoring the Future survey results from 2020, we do see a significant decline in reports of daily or near daily vaping. And they define that as 20 plus times in the past month. And that's changed from last year. The numbers have nearly halved, which is great for the daily use. We also see a decrease in those reporting to use the Juul in the past year, significantly in the older grades. Juul previously was the most popular brand among teens. So we see similar results with vaping marijuana. Daily use shows a significant decline for 10th and 12th graders, but past year remains unchanged. The use of marijuana, the most commonly used illicit drug by adolescents, did not significantly change in any of these 3 grades for lifetime, past year, or past month. So only that daily or near daily. So this is great. Again, it's only showing us a very small window. So I want to just go to what we had from our 2019 data, which breaks it down into past month prevalence. And this is what the survey results showed. The first cluster that we see here represents vaping of any substance in the past 30 days. So here you see 12.2% of 8th graders, that's 1 in 12, 25% of 10th graders, that's 1 in 4, and 30.9% of 12th graders, 1 in 3 kids are reporting vaping anything in the past month. If we move over to the next columns, you'll see the number that reported vaping just nicotine in the past 30 days. So you have 9.6% of 8th graders, 19.9% of 10th graders, and 25.5% of 12th graders. And then over again to the next column here, the percentage of marijuana vaping also rose from 2.6 to 3.9% of 8th graders. 8 to 12.6% of 10th graders, and 7.5 to 14% of 12th graders. That's the second largest single increase for high school seniors ever measured in 45 years, which was surpassed only by the number of kids that were vaping nicotine from 2017 to 2018. So e-liquids also differ in regards to the type of nicotine that they contain. So aside from the different things that could be in these e-cigarettes, just the nicotine alone can differ. And I just want to touch on this quickly because I think this is really important information. Free-base nicotine is what you would commonly find in most e-juices that come in bottles. So it's formed by converting nicotine from its natural state, and then ammonia is added to make it more alkaline. Free-base e-juices typically range from 0 to 36 milligrams of nicotine, and higher concentrations would be really too harsh to handle. So what happens when you get a higher concentration is you have to switch over to what they call a nicotine salt. And nicotine salt is a free base nicotine with salt added. And the reason they add salt is to lower the pH levels in the nicotine so it's smoother and makes that throat hit a little more tolerable. It also makes the nicotine more absorbable, which means that you can comfortably vape high levels of nicotine. The Juul pods, for one example, have 59 milligrams of nicotine. This is higher than any level of nicotine in any tobacco product on the market. They claim on the package it's 5%, 5% by volume. So when kids look at this, and we know this from our surveys, they look at that 5% and they think, oh, 5% strength, that's not a lot. Well, that doesn't sound like a lot to an adult either, but 5% strength is the amount of nicotine, the strength of the nicotine within that one pod. So it's actually higher than anything on the market. With nicotine salts, it also contains benzoic acid, which is a food preservative that pairs up with nicotine, and it helps shuttle those high amounts of nicotine to the brain, similar to how nicotine is delivered in cigarettes. The problem is when you have benzoic acid and you mix it with vitamin C, which a lot of these e-liquids have, and then you have the presence of heat. So we know that e-cigarettes use heat to heat up the e-liquid, and then the e-liquid turns into the aerosol and we vape it. Well, when you have benzoic acid with vitamin C and it's in the presence of heat, it converts benzoic acid into benzene, which is a well-known carcinogen. So we need to educate our adolescents. We need to teach them the real facts about vaping, not just what the media wants them to hear. They need to know what they're actually putting into their bodies and what effects these chemicals are having on their bodies. Let's start with the contents of e-liquids and pods. So e-liquids contain propylene glycol, which is also called PG. It's a liquid used to flavor food products, and it's considered safe for edible products. It's used to get that strong throat hit. So something that cigarette smokers say that they like about cigarette smoking is the feeling they get in the back of their throat. Propylene glycol mimics that in e-cigarettes. Vegetable glycerin, also called VG, is a liquid made from vegetable oil that creates the cloud. So something like the Juul that's meant to be discreet has smaller amounts of the vegetable glycerin and more amounts of the propylene glycol. And then something like the mod, which creates those enormous clouds of aerosol, those have higher levels of the vegetable glycerin. So together, those two make 100% of the base. Vegetable glycerin has a slightly sweet aftertaste, and we don't know how safe it is to inhale, but we do know that both PG and VG are known respiratory irritants, and neither have been FDA approved for constant inhalation. E-juices also contain flavors, which are made of different chemicals. There's a number of chemicals that make up each flavor. So something like cotton candy has about 20 different chemicals that make up that one flavor. Research to date suggests that some of these flavors can cause inflammatory responses in lung cells. Inhaling flavoring agents, which are often aldehydes, poses a health concern since these chemicals are similar to toxic aldehydes found in cigarette smoke, like formaldehyde. And mixing multiple flavors increases the toxicity. There are some flavors that contain cinnamon, and those have cinnamaldehyde in them. These e-liquids come with a warning on the bottles that say that you shouldn't be using them in a plastic pod or a plastic cartridge because it's a corrosive and it could eat away at the pod. So it's on the market to vape. Go ahead and vape it. Just use it in a glass pod because it'll eat away at the pods. Doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. When an e-liquid's vaporized, It also contains metallic particles from the heating coils that can create toxic effects on vital organs. And some of these e-liquids have very high levels of ethanol or alcohol, which used as a solvent and inhaling can be toxic to the effects on the brain. And finally, nearly all e-liquids contain nicotine, which we know is a highly addictive chemical. So why are we so concerned about nicotine? Well, like we just mentioned, it is a highly addictive chemical. It's a stimulant that causes changes in brain chemistry very quickly and leaves the brain craving more. Specifically, the reaction that nicotine has on the brain results in the stimulation of pleasure centers in the brain. When it's inhaled, nicotine enters the brain after passing through the lungs and then binds to the pleasure receptors of the brain. That causes a release of neurotransmitters, also called pleasure chemicals or dopamine, providing the user with a temporary feeling of pleasure. It might not sound like a terrible thing, but our body naturally produces dopamine. So when it has nicotine on board and on board often, it says to itself, well, there's no need for me to keep producing this chemical. Something else is coming on board and creating dopamine. So it slowly cuts back on the amount of dopamine that it creates naturally. Well, it doesn't take long for our bodies to adapt to it. And when we try to stop that nicotine, our bodies don't feel the way that it used to. So the user has a hard time creating that natural feeling of pleasure without nicotine on board. So then you need nicotine just to feel normal. Nicotine doesn't just affect the brain, it also affects different parts of our body. Let me just see, my PowerPoint was messing up on me here. We know that it affects your heart. When you have this much of a stimulant on board, it creates the release of adrenaline, and that causes a fight or flight response. We know that nicotine can independently cause trouble breathing and damage to our lungs outside of all the chemicals and toxins in cigarettes. And it can also cause you increased acid reflux. It relaxes the muscle on top of your stomach, which allows those acids to leak out. Nicotine can negatively impact your reproductive organs. And lastly, it suppresses insulin output from the pancreas, which causes users to have slightly higher blood sugar levels or become hypoglycemic. And although the science on the relationship between COVID and tobacco use, such as cigarettes and e-cigarettes, is still not clear, using tobacco products like cigarettes and e-cigarettes can lead to respiratory conditions like COPD. Therefore, someone who becomes infected with COVID-19 has the potential of having worse health outcomes. And although scientific evidence is still incomplete, some studies do suggest that the use of e-cigarettes may add to your risk of getting COVID-19 and may contribute to the severity of the illness if you do get it. So, more reasons for concern. So, research suggests that nicotine exposure during adolescence may have lasting adverse effects on the brain development and lead to negative outcomes. For example, nicotine exposure is associated with increased anxiety, depression, difficulty learning and remembering, and being more impulsive. Unfortunately, many popular e-cigarettes, especially the Juul, contain very high levels of nicotine, and nicotine exposure also increases one's vulnerability to trying and getting addicted to other substances. So we're also really concerned about misperceptions of what e-cigarette vapor is. Many people think it's simply a harmless water vapor. However, the vapor is actually aerosol, which is a propellant for many products, including hairspray and cleaning products. When water vapor condenses, the water is simply absorbed through the membranes in the lungs and into the bloodstream. PG and VG, like we said, the base of all e-cigarettes, are larger molecules that aren't as easily absorbed when you inhale deeply into your lungs. They can cause inflammation and damage, and you may or may not feel the effects right away. Another concern we have about vaping is the gateway effect. Kids who vape are more likely to try other types of tobacco. Their developing brains make it easier for them to get hooked. Studies show that the use of e-cigarettes at baseline was associated with progression to traditional cigarettes in youth. And in fact, one study suggested that teens who use e-cigarettes are 6 times more likely to move on to conventional cigarettes. So another aspect of being able to prevent our youth from using is understanding why they're using. And beyond thinking that vaping is basically a harmless water vapor, what's the big intrigue? One major reason that's been shown in numerous studies is simple curiosity. The most consistently identified reason for experimentation and continued use of e-cigarettes among young people is because of the flavors. There are over 1,000 different flavors on the market. In 2020, 82.9% of adolescents said that they used flavored e-cigarettes. Fruit was the most common at around 73%, then mint about 56%, menthol 37%, and candy, desserts, and other sweets were about 36%. In January of 2020, the FDA did prohibit the sale of pre-filled cartridges in any flavor other than tobacco and menthol unless authorized by the FDA. So previously, people could make any flavors they want, put them on the market, and it wasn't a problem. Now the FDA is saying, well, we need to approve all of these pre-filled cartridges before they go on the market. Well, not all these brands use pre-filled cartridges, and a lot of the kids are refilling the cartridges with the bottles, which are not as well regulated. So we recently conducted 8 high school focus groups from September through December of 2019 with 62 teens. 6 of the groups were current users reporting using on average of 17 days in the past month. The other 2 groups were past users reporting no use in the past month. We asked them why they used, what they didn't like about using, and why they unintentionally quit. Some of the reasons for use were social reasons. If I'm with my family, like, I don't even think about it really, but like if we're in a group and someone has one, it just makes me fiend. Stress relief. Honestly, I overthink things a lot. So like I feel like when I'm hitting the device that it makes me stop thinking about like all the stuff that's like going on inside my head. So it's like a stress reliever. Access to the device. If like someone has it, I'll use it. But if I'm not looking for it, like I'm not trying to buy one or anything. And then the buzz or the nicotine effects. I don't feel that buzz no more. So just want the buzz again. So you just continue to go buy more. Habitual. I just hit it to hit it. Like I don't even really feel anything anymore. Like if I don't hit it for a while and then I do, I like get a little high, a little head high, but like I'll just be lying in bed. I'll just hit it while I'm watching TV. Boredom. Like if I was bored, I would just hit it, not because I needed it or wanted it. If I was just bored, I grab it. Or being at school. The second that bell rings, I'm in the bathroom with it. Everybody is in the bathroom with it. The most common reasons for disliking e-cigarettes after the simple cost factor were the negative health effects, feeling sick, gastrointestinal issues. Kids were reporting vomiting or having the urge to have a bowel movement, constantly coughing, sharp shooting chest pains that come and go, trouble breathing, shortness of breath, sore throat, phlegm, feeling like it's stuck in their chest, worsening of asthma symptoms, headaches when refraining from use. And addiction was also mentioned as a reason for disliking e-cigarettes. they don't like to be viewed as being addicted. The most common reasons for unintentionally quitting were tolerance breaks. I've taken tolerance breaks. It's to the point where I don't feel anything, but I'm just so used to feeling like high or buzzed all the time. Health concerns. I got really sick last year, like in February or January. I had to go on antibiotics. Like something was really wrong with my throat and like my lungs, like I couldn't breathe well. I had to go on an inhaler. Yeah, that made me stop for like a few weeks. Some, oh, let me just go back to that. Some other reasons were due to lack of access. So if they broke their device, and lastly was to breathe better in sports. So they noticed that they weren't breathing well and they took a break just while the sport was going on so they can try and start to feel better. So as of February 18th, and this was the last time the CDC has updated these values, again, because of COVID. But we do know that they still are compiling this data. There have been reported cases of severe pulmonary illness linked to vaping or e-cigarette use, called e-cigarette or vaping product use associated lung injury. Well, that's a mouthful, so we call it a VALI. These cases included symptoms such as coughing, shortness of breath, chest pain, fever, fatigue, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain. Some patients reported symptoms to have occurred over a few days. Some reported to have occurred over a few weeks. Vaping-related disorders have ranged from mild to severe, with hospitalization, intensive care with breathing machines, and in some cases, death. In most cases, but not all, people experience these symptoms while using CBD and marijuana or THC e-liquids, and or using e-cigarette devices and e-liquids that were mixed at home or purchased off market, such as purchasing an e-liquid or a device off the street or from a non-licensed retailer. They mix these together, and that's when the problems occur, when they're mixing different substances together. So laboratory data shows that vitamin E acetate, an additive in some THC containing e-cigarette or vaping products, is strongly linked to a VALI. Vitamin E acetate, which is inhaled, acts as a coating of honey that sticks around the lungs, and it's added to dilute the THC in order to increase profits or as a thickening agent. So someone will buy this THC oil off the street, very expensive. They take vitamin E acetate, mix it with the THC oil. It makes it look more pure, and it also stretches that THC much farther, so they're making more money doing this. So just quickly to touch upon marijuana and its potential risks. There are numerous risks associated with marijuana, and high schoolers are unaware of many of these. So just a few here. Some quit strategies that the teens in our focus groups admitted to trying were quitting cold turkey, cutting back on the amount of nicotine in their device, limiting their access to e-cigarettes, restricting social influences. So restricting who they're around. If somebody's vaping, they try not to be around them. Beyond prevention and education, we need to provide necessary tools for success in quitting. We need to establish a plan to quit. What will they gain by stopping? Set a date to quit. Stress management. How will they deal with the triggers? How can they manage stress from withdrawal? Refusal skills. How to be assertive and stay on plan. And lastly, dealing with relapse. What do you do when you slip up? So interventions are just being developed. Here are some of the resources available. The efficacy of many of these is still being established, but they can be used as referral sources for youth and teachers. So our group, led by Dr. Krishnan Saran, who is here with us this afternoon, has successfully developed similar interventions for cigarette smoking among youth in the past. We currently are developing and testing a program funded by the American Heart Association aimed at reducing vaping among youth. This is a fully remote quit nicotine intervention for adolescent e-cigarette users who want to quit vaping. It's a 4-week-long intervention, which includes 2 components: a remote contingency management intervention that involves the delivery of incentives for staying abstinent, and weekly vaping cognitive behavioral therapy. Then we follow up with them 4 times over the course of the year. We'll test the use of individual counseling focused on teaching them skills to manage withdrawal, dealing with cravings, and other coping skills that they will need to be successful. The other program we have, also funded by the American Heart Association, is a nicotine-free and win program. Again, this is a fully remote program. It's a school-wide incentive-based program to motivate students to adopt a nicotine-free lifestyle. It's geared toward both users and non-users. Students can sign up at any time and pledge to be nicotine-free. We'll have monthly drawings to win prizes upon providing a negative nicotine saliva sample. And those saliva samples are conducted contactless. Those will get mailed to them, and then we will arrange for a contactless pickup of that sample. And actually for this study, correction with this, we will mail these saliva test kits to them the day before we tell them that they are the winner of this contest. And then what happens is the day after, when we know they have this sample, they are going to Zoom call us. They show us the results over Zoom that they are nicotine free, and then they win prizes. And we're doing $50 Amazon gift cards for this. So these are all brand new programs that we are just launching. And if anybody would like more information, Ellen can certainly forward you our information and we can send you some flyers. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing now, and Dr. Krishnan Saran is present. All right, so we can address any questions that you may have. Let me just have Dr. Krishnan Saran unmute. There we go. All righty. So let's just see. Can you say the part about insulin again at the end? Okay. Just reading some messages in chat first. So what happens with nicotine is it affects your pancreas, and it affects the output of insulin in your pancreas, which means that people that have nicotine on board are they have slightly elevated sugar levels. So they're slightly hyperglycemic. And okay, the other's just from Ellen. So do we have any questions? Oh, people need to unmute.
Yes, there we go. Okay. So in the studies that you've done with the youth, what would you say, or is there something that they've said to you that would have prevented them from starting to use?
Suchitra, do you want to address that?
Sure. So you're talking about the focus groups, Ellen, that Trisha mentioned?
Yes, or any contact you've had with young people around this issue.
I think for the most part, social influences are very, very important. And that's not anything that is specific to e-cigarettes. That's true of youth and any substance use. You know, they're always motivated by to use by people around them using, or being in an environment where easy access is available. That's one of the biggest problems of e-cigarettes, which is they are relative, even though there is a law that says they cannot be sold to those who are 18 and under, they are relatively very easily available to these youth. Either their parents buy them for them, or older siblings or older friends buy them and share these products with them. So access and social issues, I think, would be the two things which they state are important.
Okay, thank you.
So you haven't seen much change with the law changing in terms of the impact on access. Have you seen any difference in terms of access?
It's a very good question, Deb. It's a good question because I don't think there have been rigorous studies on the change in the law and access, and that is also, those kinds of studies are also influenced by COVID. So, I think Tricia showed you the data earlier, where there are national surveys that are ongoing to assess use of e-cigarette use behaviors. And unfortunately, these surveys go on all through the year, but in most cases this year, they had to stop all the surveys in March because of COVID. So we only have partial data. And the partial data seems to suggest that e-cigarette use has leveled off, which is great. And it's wonderful news for all of us, but we are also a little hesitant to really believe that. We want to see what the rest of this year's data and next year's data looks like. So it's very hard to isolate the effects of the law changes, which kind of took place at the same time, and this. So it's hard to tell.
Mm-hmm.
So I see a question in chat about our tribe program that we have. You can most certainly refer families to it. The Quit Nicotine study that we have is available for anybody at this point. We are trying to work with high schools now to get the information out to the students. And we're hoping to maybe get a lot of this launched for the new year, but it is in effect right now. You do not have to be affiliated to one particular school that's handling this. Any counselors can refer anybody to this program if they want to quit smoking, as long as they're between 14 and 19 years old and want to quit, vaping, and want to quit vaping, they can participate in this program.
Is there a cost associated with that, Tricia?
There is no cost. We actually pay the kids to participate in this program.
Okay.
So let me just add a little bit to this. So Tricia is absolutely right, but I want to emphasize this is still a research intervention in the sense that we are still developing the intervention, but it's really based on principles that we have used to develop smoking cessation programs very successfully. And anyone who joins the intervention works with a trained counselor, a PhD level counselor, and who works through a guide to teach them skills of how to quit, how to develop the skills to quit, and how to stay abstinent. So it's based on principles that we've successfully used for smoking cessation. We are applying the same principles to e-cigarettes. There are some subtle differences between e-cigarettes and cigarettes. One of the biggest differences, as Tricia mentioned, is this availability of flavors. For any of you who are counselors who work on these kinds of behavioral changes, you know that dealing with cues and dealing with teaching people how to deal with cues related to substance use behaviors, how to deal with what makes them use the substance is very important. And a unique cue, which is very unique to e-cigarettes, is the availability of so many flavors. Many kids say they crave the flavors and they want more flavors. And so, these are the kind of nuances that we've introduced into our cognitive behavioral therapy intervention, which is different for e-cigarettes versus cigarettes.
And have you seen any effect because of the flavor ban that went into effect?
Again, it's the same issue that I raised earlier. Very hard to isolate the effects from the effect of COVID at this point. I will tell you this though, we have a paper on this the company Juul introduced a voluntary ban on some of its flavors last year. So it wasn't a federally mediated ban, but Juul themselves said we are not going to have mango flavor and some watermelon flavors and all these flavors which are very popular. And they said we are going to only sell tobacco, mint, and menthol. And we actually did see a decrease in use of youth use of Juul products after they removed some of those flavors from the product, but that from the market. But that said, at the same time, there were these other products coming on the market, give me some names, Trisha, like the newer products.
Right, a lot of the disposables the
Yeah.
kids started using.
Right.
Right.
So they started using those instead because those were then available in all the flavors that Juul had just taken off the market. So it's very hard to figure out what the flavor bans are actually doing
Mm.
at this point.
We
This
do
is
know
Ma-
that those disposables have gotten very, very popular. First of all, they're very inexpensive. They're much easier to hide the evidence that they're vaping because there's not a bunch of separate parts. It's one piece, and they definitely have taken off.
Hi, this is Maggie. Thank you, ladies, so much. Tricia, can you just a little bit about the alcohol? So you talked about alcohol content within. Can you talk a little bit about that? How much? What? Because that's my first kind of hearing that piece of it.
So Suchitra, she's talking about the ethanol in the e-liquids.
Right. And let me take a stab at that, Maggie, and we can send you, if you're interested, Trisha can forward a paper that we have on this. So
I'd
the
love it.
ethanol is actually used as a solvent. I'm sorry, I need my second cup of coffee today. Ethanol is used as a solvent in the e-liquids. So and sometimes it's used a lot depending on what they are putting in the e-liquid, and sometimes there's very little. We some members from our research group here at Yale looked at the ethanol content of some of the e-liquids, and this was not like a widespread evaluation of every e-liquid in the market, but they looked at ethanol content in some e-liquids, and that's what the paper is on. And they found that there was enough ethanol in some of them, enough alcohol in some of them to actually raise your blood alcohol, breath alcohol levels, sorry, not blood, breath alcohol levels. So if you use them and then you blew into a breathalyzer, you actually could see the levels going up. But this is not widespread. It's not, we haven't done a test of every e-liquid on the market, but that's what the ethanol or the alcohol is used for. It's used as a solvent.
Thank you.
So
We'll send you that paper.
Yeah, I just
Thank you.
asked Ellen to forward my email address
Yeah.
to people.
Yeah.
So I'm looking in the chat and it's asking, the focus group quotes were very interesting. I'm curious if any themes emerged about parents from those focus groups. Do students perceive parents as concerned about vaping, clueless that their children are vaping? I don't, Suchitra, do you remember if we asked about their parents?
We didn't ask about the parents from the perspective of whether they were clueless about vaping or whether they, were that aspect of it. But we asked them more about if they wanted parents involved in interventions that we were developing. One of the purposes of the focus groups was not just to understand, why they use these products, but also what they want in intervention programs or what they would feel would work for them. And unfortunately, one of the things that we heard loud and clear for some reason was that the kids did not want their parents to be involved in intervention programs. But that's not really something that is, again, specific to e-cigarettes. We've always heard this from youth about almost any product you talk to. They don't want parents involved. They would do it if they would do a peer-based program. If their friend was participating, that motivates them obviously to participate in an intervention, but definitely don't want their parents involved. But there's other literature in the field which suggests that it's not clear-cut, but most youth say that there are rules about vaping and substance use and smoking in their home, But many also say that their parents, like I said, provide these products for them. A lot of parents think that it's better if their youth are using these products versus smoking. Unfortunately, the problem is that you have to deal with the nicotine dependence that comes from, using e-cigarettes and all the other aspects.
Right. And Emily, just to add on to that, so I spent a lot of time this past year doing many, many talks to both students and parents. And the parents were probably more or equally as surprised with ingredients in these devices and the effect of nicotine. We've never talked about nicotine. It's always been about tobacco. So when you single out nicotine, nobody really knows what nicotine does. Everybody knows what tobacco does. So to isolate that one chemical from tobacco, it's still very new for people, and parents had no idea that these devices weren't as safe as the media had made it out to be. So, and to Suchitra's point, many of these parents were providing these devices for the kids. Schools would take them away, they'd call the parents in, the parent would give it right back to the student right in front of the principals. So it was tough, and it's an education that both parents and the students need. There's another question. Is there information about how many of the kids had parents that vaped as well? In our survey, I believe, did we ask that in our survey, Suchitra?
We do. I don't remember the current numbers, I'm sorry, but I can tell you that probably a significant, not all of them, but a significant number of kids, their parents either vape or smoke. They probably also are cigarette smokers, and they themselves are having trouble with quitting cigarette use, and so that's definitely the case, but I don't have a number, I'm sorry.
I don't see more questions in chat. Does anybody else have questions here?
You should be able to unmute yourselves if you do have a question and want to ask out loud. So
one other question, did you also research how many of the students who started to vape were then later smoking combustible cigarettes or vice versa?
Yes, and there is a literature on this too. Unfortunately, what that literature shows is that many of these students do continue on to using cigarettes. And of greater concern also, it seems that e-cigarette is now the first product that many of these students are starting with. So they have access to it, they're starting early and starting young, and are then moving on to using cigarettes too. So it's not just our work, but there's multiple papers. And again, if you're interested, we can pull together a list of papers for you to see that I can have Trisha send to you.
Right, and the research that I presented was 1 in 6 for the data that I had presented today.
Wow, thank you. Thank you.
You mentioned in your research, obviously the impact that nicotine can have on anxiety and depression, but I'm also looking at the impact the other way around, that of the use of e-cigarettes because of youth's mental health. And I don't know whether that's something you're looking at in your studies or plan to, because of the absolute rise in mental health, the existence of mental health issues in youth and the increase of mental health issues in youth.
Sure. Let me take that one, Trisha. So, I always emphasize when we go everywhere, when we give these talks is, our studies focus on youth. And our message always is that no youth should start using these products, because there are consequences to using these products, which includes anxiety behaviors, depression, and other kinds of conditions. But the fact also remains that there are certain personality characteristics of the youth that many times lead them to use these products too. So an example of that is children who have conduct disorders, children who have ADHD. Those children are more likely to start using these products because, and the thought is they probably use it because it helps them with the cognition control, it helps them with their attentional behaviors, it helps them with their impulsive behaviors. But the question really is that are there other interventions you can use for treating some of these inherent behaviors in youth, and does it really have to be nicotine? So that's the youth part of the story. But when it comes to people who already have mental health issues in the adult population, that's an entirely other issue. We do work with adults also, and there is still this huge question when it comes to e-cigarettes as to whether e-cigarettes can be a way of motivating adult smokers to quit smoking. There's nothing that is as bad for you as tobacco smoking or combustible cigarette smoking. And the reason e-cigarettes came on the market, as Trisha probably mentioned initially, is to provide smokers with an alternative form of cleaner nicotine that they could use, so they were not smoking cigarettes and could actually switch to using these quote unquote cleaner nicotine products. But when you do the risk-benefit analysis for an adult smoker who, in terms of whether this product would be beneficial for them, that's a very different analysis than what you would do for a youth who is just starting these products, and the only consequence for them is that they're going to get nicotine addicted. So I think you have to kind of separate the two issues out. And I have heard a lot of counselors tell me that their clients who have mental health disorders, in fact, it's well known that almost 90% of people who are schizophrenic use cigarettes because it helps them with many of their symptomatology and their attentional problems. If you asked me today, is it beneficial for some of those smokers to switch to e-cigarettes? I would say it probably is going to be, even though we don't know all the harm profiles of this product. It's probably going to be beneficial if you can get them away from cigarettes. But the big question is, are you getting them away from cigarettes? Because what we are finding with many smokers who are trying to use these products to quit is they're not switching completely, but they're just switching to using both products at the same time. Because they use cigarettes where they can smoke, and then they use e-cigarettes where they can't smoke. So there's lots of nuances to that answer. So I'm sorry if I completely confused you, but this is a debate which is just ongoing, and it's a huge public health debate about the benefit for adults versus risk for youth.
Right. Oh, I can imagine. That's why I ask it, because I can't even know how to separate any of the issues.
Yeah.
The whole connection between mental health and substance use in general is so complicated. So.
Yes, it's very complicated. And, we deal with this all the time, where counselors are constantly telling their clients, do everything but don't quit smoking because it's going to help you with all your other conditions. And that may not be the best approach to take. And we have to do a lot to get over that issue also.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
So Trisha just put in the chat box about how you could refer people to their Yale Quit Vaping program. So there's a screener on the yalequitvaping.com, or there's a phone number where you can text QUIT to initiate that referral. So, so please check that out in the chat box, and I will also try to keep track of that and send it out to folks.
And Ellen, I will send you a couple flyers.
Okay, great.
That you can email out, and those flyers can be, all the information is on the flyer, and those can be sent to either the student or a parent. But this is very adolescent friendly. We know that they don't really like to call us to talk to us, so we
Yes.
try and do everything around texting. So
Yeah.
that number, if all they text is QUIT, we can text them some more information about the study and ask them if they want to talk to us about it, and we can give them more information about it. And that QUIT nicotine study does require parental permission. So this is nothing that if the kids are under 18 can do without their parents saying, yes, it's okay for you to participate in the study. So that that part is covered by our Human Investigations Committee. And then that YaleQuitVaping.com is their screener. So if they say, I totally want to do this, they go on that and it will screen them just to see how much they're using and when we can call them.
Great.
The other
And
thing I would
that's,
also like to say is one of our goals also is to educate parents. So through your organization, if you, learn of people who are interested in more information on this, we are definitely open to doing that, because our goal is not just is interventional, but is also education. And one of the things we have also been considering doing is developing an information brochure for parents that can actually list out all that we know about e-cigarettes. I mean, it's constantly changing, but everything we know which can be distributed. So if and when we get that done, we can pass that along also.
great. That's terrific. And the quit vaping, that's a Connecticut specific, correct?
Yes.
For Connecticut residents. Okay.
But there
And
were some other links I think Trisha had in her talk. I had sent her a few links today.
yes,
That,
yes,
there are some
Yes.
national prevention
yes.
resources available that you can definitely offer, that people should definitely look into also.
Okay. Yeah, I know at Greenwich Together, we definitely would like to educate our parents more in the community. So we will probably be calling you again. And also we have on our website a vaping page, a page dedicated to information about vaping and also resources like these. So I'm going to add these resources that you just gave us today to that, because it is also a good place to for people to access information. So if you do come up with that informational brochure, I'd love to add that to our website as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'll write myself a note now to send those out to you. And I also will, I know last year I had one and some information has been updated since then, but I will make a new recording because a lot of times towns will try and pull together one of these Zoom talks so parents can attend, but even virtual, it seems like it's tough for them to attend it. So last year I had made a recording that a lot of the schools were emailing out to the parents. And it was basically a parent geared information session so that they can watch on their own free time. So once I get that together again, I can forward that information to you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. All right. Any last minute questions before we close? All right. Well, thank you so much, both of you, Dr. Krishan Sharan and
Sure, of
Tricia
course.
Dahl. Thank you. Your time is very valuable, and we really appreciate you sharing your information and expertise with us.
Sure.
So much. Wonderful.
Yes.
Thank you very
for
much.
having us.
Happy to help. Yeah.
Such a great resource to have in our state as well. So thank you. And
Yeah,
thanks,
and for-
everyone. Have happy
and for-
Happy
holidays.
holidays, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome info.
Ellen, I just wanted to tell you that,
Yes.
I just heard of an effort that is starting in Connecticut to ban flavors. States can actually have laws and rules around this. So I understand there is something that will be going to the legislative session soon, or maybe in the new year. But if there's anybody from your group who's interested in this area and wants to testify and talk about this issue of flavors in e-cigarettes and how they should be regulated, I think that would be very helpful.
Yes.
At the legislative level also.
Great, because we also have started to work with a group of youth as our youth coalition arm, and they're very interested in doing some advocacy work.
Yeah.
So I think, and they've talked to their peers and talked to some of their friends about why they want to stop vaping, because some of them are vaping and have become addicted. And so they could share some stories, I'm sure. Is that through the Match
Hi, Elizabeth
Coalition?
Lori.
I'm sorry?
Sorry about that.
I don't know if somebody else said
Maggie,
something.
did you want to say something?
No, but we
Okay.
do have someone, Ingrid Gillespie, who does lead a legislative group with legislators on those issues. So that would be critical for us because
Right.
we do have a very strong legislative group down here.
Mhm.
Yeah, I don't know, have exact information on when this will all happen, but if I get the information, again, I can have Tricia send it to you because I
Great.
think your organization reaches other people too. And if there is, I know Massachusetts banned flavors, which
Mhm.
was really great. And it would be nice to see that happen in Connecticut too.
Yes, yeah.
So we will keep you.
Is that an effort through the match?
I don't know. I'm
Lung
just getting
Association?
information on it. I've
Okay.
done a lot of work with DPH. I sit on some of their committees, but I don't know if this is through DPH or if it's through somebody else.
Okay,
Once I get more information, I'll let you know.
great, excellent, thank you. All right.
Okay. Bye,
Again,
everybody.
thank
Happy
you so
holidays.
much.
Thank you.
Ellen, make sure you stop the recording before I end this. I don't want you to lose it.